What if the real key to being genuinely kind wasn't just about, the things we do,
Hmm.
but something deeper, like a fundamental change inside us?
That's exactly what we're exploring today.
Yeah, today on the deep dive, we're looking at this really fascinating set of guidelines called Shremat.
Right.
Think of it as a kind of unique map for, well, personal growth, aiming to build what the source calls a charitable soul.
Precisely. We've been looking at a spiritual discourse, and it lays out Shremat as these directions coming from what it calls the One Father.
The highest source of wisdom in this view.
That's the idea, a highest authority within this framework. So our goal for this deep dive is really to understand the core of these directions
Okay.
and how they suggest we can develop a truly um, giving nature. We want to offer you, the listener, maybe a fresh perspective on individual growth.
And maybe even on the whole idea of charity itself.
Exactly. A new light, perhaps.
Okay, so let's get into this idea of Shremat then. The source really emphasizes these instructions are from the one Father. And it sets up a contrast, doesn't it, between that and just following our own thoughts, our own dictates of the mind. Why make that distinction? What's the thinking there?
Well, it's an interesting perspective. The source suggests that in the current state of things, which it actually calls the kingdom of Rifan,
Right.
human guidance on its own just isn't enough. It can't truly elevate us.
So it's saying we need something else.
Yes, it proposes we're in a specific time now where we can actually access direct guidance from this one Father to become more pure, like essentially pure in our being.
And it mentions a cycle, like we were once more elevated.
It does touch on that, a cyclical idea, where we were masters, in a sense, but then became impure over time.
Even Brahma, it says, who was supposedly a key figure.
Exactly. Even the initial master figure became impure eventually. It suggests this requires, an intellectual understanding of the whole play, as it calls it.
That's a big statement. And it also says something quite absolute about right and wrong. The whole world is wrong. Only the one Father is right. That's pretty strong.
It is strong. From the source's viewpoint, it seems to be suggesting there's one singular ultimate truth.
And everything else is a deviation.
That seems to be the implication. Deviations lead us away from our highest potential. And following Shrimat, these divine directions, is positioned as the path.
The path to becoming masters of the land of truth.
Correct. But the source does acknowledge this can feel a bit abstract.
Because the Father is incognito, unseen.
Unseen, incorporeal, yes.
Yeah.
And it also warns against mixing these directions up with guidance from other people or sources.
Yeah, it specifically mentions not mistaking them for directions from Dada.
Right.
And then there's this idea of Maya, like an obstacle.
Yes, Maya is presented as something that can prevent us from fully accepting or embracing these elevated directions. There's a real focus on this one source.
So the ideal response is just accept whatever the Father says.
That's presented as the ideal, yes. Complete acceptance, though it does recognize that, practically speaking, people's adherence varies.
Yeah.
The whole reason the Father is said to come is to give these directions, because they get forgotten over time.
And it connects this to the Bhagavad Gita, which many people know.
It does. It mentions the Srimad Bhagavad Gita as like a famous set of directions from the past.
But different from now.
Yes, it distinguishes it, saying the Gita was for a different era, a different purpose, whereas this is direct guidance for now.
Okay. And the cycle comes up again every 5,000 years. The Father comes to give Shrimat specifically to Farat.
To make it the most elevated land, yes. That's the framework presented.
But it also notes that even with reminders, some people, they don't follow.
It does observe that, despite daily reminders. And it clarifies the directions might come through Brahma, but the speaker, the source, is the Father.
And this Father is described as being beyond physical needs, like eating or drinking.
Yes, beyond earthly experiences entirely.
Okay, that sets the stage. So then it talks about the foremost Shrimat, the number one direction.
Which is very direct. Remember me.
Simple, but profound, maybe. And the second one.
Equally powerful. Do not perform any sinful act.
And then it pushes for self-reflection, doesn't it? Ask your heart how much sin you have committed. That's quite personal.
Very personal. This focus on remembrance and purity is absolutely central. The source paints this picture of humanity now.
Saying everyone's urn of sin is full.
That's the phrase, yes. That we're generally on the wrong path. And the way back to righteousness is through this connection with the Father.
It brings up the Gita again here, too.
Just to clarify its role.
Yeah.
Saying the current knowledge isn't in the Gita.
Right.
The Gita had its purpose for the path of devotion, helping people receive the fruit of that devotion.
But this is about salvation now.
It talks about salvation through this knowledge, yes,
Right.
but then also degradation, that cyclical pattern again. We receive salvation, then gradually become degraded. The world now is tamaparan, impure.
And we're at the end of a long cycle, 84 births.
That's the idea. We've gone through the whole cycle, and now we're at the end with death over everyone's head, referring to the end of the current age, specifically in Farad.
It really highlights Bharat's role, calling the Gita the scripture of the original deity religion.
Yes, emphasizing that unique spiritual history.
And makes an interesting point about other faiths,
That followers of other religions tend to stick to their own faiths,
whereas people from Bharat have explored other paths.
Exactly. It suggests those with roots in Farad are the ones who've moved into other traditions.
Mm-hmm.
So the father's reminding the children of their forgotten original religion.
Their deity religion.
Mm-hmm. It also clarifies the term so.
Saying it doesn't mean we are God.
Right. It argues that idea came from gurus later on the path of devotion. It even points out the kind of contradiction of having many gurus, but still seeking God separately.
And then that really vivid image, the beautiful soul becoming ugly.
Yes, Sundar becoming Sham. The number one Saito Pradhan, one becoming the last most Tamo Pradhan one. It's a powerful illustration of the soul's journey through the cycle.
Which leads us to the medicine, right? The solution.
Exactly. Understanding the 84 births, understanding our current state of, well, ugliness or impurity.
And the fix is.
Again, very direct. Remember, me and you souls will become pure from impure. Your sins of many births will be absolved.
So it all comes back to remembrance.
That connection is presented as the absolute key to purification.
And the impurity started with Revan.
Yes, the coming of Revan is described as the start of the decline, this continuous fall into sin, making the current world a world of sinful souls.
And only the Father can reverse that, transform us.
From ugly residents of hell to beautiful residents of heaven. That's the transformation promised.
What's identified as the root cause of impurity?
It's very specific. The pyre of lust, called the greatest enemy.
Wow. So conquering lust means conquering the world.
That's the assertion. It specifically identifies lust as the number one vice, the primary impurity in this context, more so than anger or other things.
Okay. And humanity apparently called out for help to become pure.
Yes, leading to the Father's response. Become pure in this last birth.
There's a sense of hope there too, isn't there? Like day follows night.
Absolutely. The golden age will follow this current confluence age. The inevitability is stressed.
And it clarifies something about the world itself.
Yes. Perhaps surprisingly for some, it states there's only one world.
Not multiple heavens or hells elsewhere.
No. It says stories of many worlds belong to the path of devotion. The Father, it says, is now telling the truth.
The truth about the ages. Gold and silver.
Gold and silver, copper, iron, all happening here on this one tree, this one world.
This really sets up the need for self-assessment then.
It does. It directly prompts. Look inside yourself and ask, how much do I follow Srimat to become Satapradhan?
That is, to become a charitable soul.
Exactly. It equates Satapradhan with charitable and Tamapradhan with sinful.
And the main sin is indulgence in vice, like lust.
That's the primary one, yes. Though it also mentions other things like stealing, cheating things, even worldly authorities warn against.
But the core instruction is become pure.
Now that you belong to me, follow my directions. The main thing is not to commit any further sin.
It gets very specific about stealing, particularly in a spiritual context.
Extremely specific. Even stealing something tiny, a straw, in God's house, so to speak, is seen as a huge deal.
Leading to major consequences.
Yes, stealing from Shiv Baba's Bandara, the kitchen or storehouse, is called a very big sin.
With severe repercussions mentioned.
100-fold punishment, potentially being born into difficult circumstances for many births. It's a strong warning.
And just because God knows everything.
It doesn't mean wrongdoing is excused. The term used is Jani Janahar, the knower. But it doesn't imply condoning. Consequences follow.
It even gives an example of habitual thieves.
Whose minds are just consumed by it, even in spiritual settings. It's used to illustrate the degraded state the source perceives.
So it really pushes for constant self-checking.
Definitely. Ask yourself, how charitable have I become? How much do I remember the Father? How much do I spin the disguise of self-realization?
Practical questions, like tracking your progress.
Yes, how long do I spend in doing God's service? How many of my sins are being cut away? It suggests looking at your chart daily.
How much charity did I perform? How long did I stay in yoga? To how many people did I show the path?
Practical steps, yes.
Yeah.
But interestingly, it also says to continue with your regular life, your business, your job.
As karma yogis.
Mhm. Integrating spirituality into daily life, not necessarily withdrawing completely.
It mentions symbols, too. Badges, the Mahabharat War.
Representing the opening of heaven's gates, a spiritual transition, and the image of Sri Krishna containing deep meaning.
Meaning that requires a broad and unlimited intellect to grasp fully.
Yes, suggesting some don't quite get it yet.
And it warns against getting caught up in small things, like being elated by a little money.
Right, seeing that as a sign of maybe lacking deeper understanding or focus.
Because carelessness leads to sin, falling from the path.
That's the caution. Neglecting the Father, neglecting the knowledge, can lead to slipping up.
It touches on destiny, too, the drama.
Yes, sometimes deviations are attributed to what's in the drama or not in someone's fortune. A complex interplay there.
But faith is key. Faith brings happiness.
Faith that the Father is teaching brings happiness and the awareness of becoming, princes and princesses in the future golden age.
Although it notes some still struggle, their stage isn't constant.
It acknowledges that. Some children still continue to wilt. Spiritual stability isn't always easy.
And it mentions destruction, rehearsals for it.
Yes, rehearsals and calamities continuing, weakening Farad as part of this larger divine plan.
But through all this, the main thing remains.
The main thing you must check inside yourself is, how much do I remember the Father? That's the constant refrain.
Because remembering him is protective, prevents becoming diseased for 21 births.
That's the promise, the sweetness of the Father, and the power of his orders. Remembering prevents future suffering.
So consider yourself a soul, remember the Father, and purity is guaranteed.
That's the core guarantee presented. It's framed as an easy path to become pure from impure.
Just through remembrance.
Yes. Even if you feel sinful, keep remembering, it says, to burn away those sins. It's about easy remembrance.
And this remembrance is different from other practices.
It explicitly says to renounce other forms of yoga from sannyasis or gurus.
Because the unlimited Father is the ultimate source, uplifting everyone.
Exactly. So others can't be the ultimate guru in this view.
So the final check-in questions are...
Ask your heart, do I commit any sin? Do I cause anyone sorrow?
And sin removal only happens through...
Only through remembrance, which requires effort, very hard work, it acknowledges.
And this knowledge, this path, is unique to the Father.
Only the one Father gives this knowledge and shows the path to liberation and liberation in life. That's the claim.
Okay, so let's talk about the essence for dharna, the points to really internalize.
Right. First, value the knowledge. See it as imperishable jewels and avoid carelessness, avoid sin.
Maintain faith for happiness.
Yes, having faith brings limitless happiness. And a strong point on integrity. Never steal in God's home. It's called a very dirty habit with those severe consequences we discussed.
And keep asking that question.
How charitable have I become? Continuous self-inquiry.
Then there's the blessing. What's the focus there?
Cultivating spiritual mercy. Giving extra power to weak, disheartened, and powerless souls.
So becoming a great donor of hope.
Exactly. Empowering the weak. Especially focusing on the poor ones who have no support, the ones who are struggling spiritually.
And within the community itself.
It emphasizes cooperation, equality, being cooperative companions, brothers, and equal effort makers. Cooperation over material donation among the close community.
Interesting distinction. And the slogan.
A powerful one. Stay constantly in the elevated company of the one Father, and no color of any other company will then be able to influence you. Focus is key.
Finally, the Avyak signal, the subtle guidance.
It encourages embodying spiritual royalty. Purity not just internally, but reflected in your personality, your appearance, your behavior.
Maintain that spiritual intoxication, that happiness.
Keeping the spiritual personality in your awareness leads to constant happiness.
And this presence can help others.
It suggests even a glance of happiness can uplift troubled souls, help resolve their questions without words.
Okay, so as we sort of wrap up this deep dive into Srimad, it's really clear it presents a very specific, very detailed path.
It really does. A path towards becoming this charitable soul.
And it's a path that heavily emphasizes inner transformation, doesn't it? Through following these directions, these Srimad.
Absolutely. With that strong focus on remembrance and purification rather than just, outward charitable acts alone.
So those seem to follow naturally from the inner state.
That seems to be the idea. The inner shift comes first.
What I find particularly interesting is how comprehensive it is.
Right. It directly links your personal purification with becoming charitable, suggesting true generosity kind of bubbles up from that interchange.
Guided by these principles, it's definitely a unique framework for thinking about personal growth.
And the meaning behind giving, yeah.
So that brings us to our final thought for you, the listener. Thinking about these principles of Shema, this idea of guidance from a higher source, the power of remembrance for inner cleaning, and the notion that true charity flows from that inner state, how might you see parallels or maybe contrasts in your own understanding of personal growth? What does it mean for you to live a meaningful, maybe a more generous life?
It's a unique perspective we've explored today.
Definitely something to ponder further. This deep dive offers one way of looking at it, and we encourage you to just, let these ideas sit with you